In this entry task, we're going to go over some vocabulary that has to do with division. And we're going to talk about what the numbers represent and words and vocabulary that we can use that are common that we can use going forward so you know exactly what number I'm talking about. On the left here, you can see there's a math problem where 16 is being divided by 3 and the answer is 5 with a remainder of 1. So you can see off to the left that each one of those numbers has a word that describes it. The 5 is what we call the quotient. That's the answer to the division problem. The 3 is what we call the divisor, and the divisor is the number that we are dividing into what we call the dividend. The dividend is the big number or the number inside the box that's being divided. And then at the bottom you can see there's the word remainder at the bottom of that, and we're going to deal with those and we're going to talk about those in later problems. But a remainder is simply what's left after we divide the divisor into the dividend to get the quotient if the number doesn't go into it an even amount of times. So let's look at the problem to the right, and we're going to call that problem number 1. We're simply going to identify the parts on this one. So we're going to go down here, we're going to say number 1 is going to be the divisor. Number 2 is going to be the dividend. And number 3 is going to be the quotient. And number 4 finally is going to be the remainder. Okay, now let's look at the problem to the right, and we'll call this, problem 1 or whatever. And we'll put a little 1 up there, right? We'll say this is problem 1. Okay, so now let's just simply write our answers down here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to practice doing these on the next couple pages. Okay, so the divisor, let's look at the divisor. The divisor is the number that we're going to divide into the number inside of the box called the dividend. So in this case, the divisor is 2. Everybody get that? See, there's the 2 right there. And the divisor is right there. Okay, next we're going to look at dividend. Dividend is, if you look over here, is the number inside the box. So the number that's inside the box is 68. So put 68 here for an answer. And then the quotient. Look over here, the quotient is the number on top. So the number on top over here is 34. And finally, the remainder. The remainder is, and this one, if we do this correctly, there is 0 remainder, right? Because there's no, if you subtract these two numbers right here, we end up with 0. So 0 is going to be the remainder. All right, everybody get that? Okay, now I have a practice question for you to do, and I want you to do the same thing as I just did on the first problem. I want you to look at my division problem, and you can see that I've done the division and I've gone through the whole process, and I want you to identify the divisor first, the dividend second, the quotient third, and the remainder. Okay, I'm going to give you 1 minute to figure that out, and go. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now we're back looking at our problem here, and hopefully you've got the answer. Raise your hand if you think you've got this answer correct. How many of you actually wrote this down in your composition books? That would be a good thing for you to do. Write down the problem up in the upper left-hand corner that describes the quotient, divisor, dividend, remainder. That would be really good. If you haven't done that, we should probably do that. Okay, now let's look at the math problem and let's identify the parts. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is look at the divisor. And the divisor, if we look up in our little white box up there, the divisor was 3. That's the number that's on the outside of the box that we are going to divide into the number inside of the box. So in this case, the 2 is our divisor. Okay, because there's the 2, and if we look over here, the 3 is the divisor over here. And that's the number that's outside of the box, and there's the divisor. It says divisor right there. So number 2, the divisor is, and the second problem is 2. Now let's look at the dividend. The dividend, if we look up here, is like the number inside the box. So in this case, our dividend is the number that we're going to divide is 487. Okay, the quotient. If you look up here, the quotient is the number that is the answer to the question. So our answer to the question is up here. And the answer is actually, the quotient is actually the whole answer, including the remainder. But we'll just, for this exercise, we'll just, and be consistent, we'll say that this is 243. And I'm going to, the remainder of 1. Okay, and now finally we'll put the remainder down here, and the remainder is 1. Okay, so let's look at that for a second. Let's look at that for a second. What do we mean by a remainder of 1? Let's talk about that. What do we mean by 1? If we look over here on the problem, what we're saying is that 2 will not go into 1 evenly, so we're not going to have a quotient that's a whole number up here. We're going to have something less than 1. So what are we saying? We're saying that this is only 1 out of 2. Okay, so we could really say that instead of this is a remainder of 1, we could also say that it's 1 over 2. Or from a decimal standpoint, we could say it's 0.5, right? I think we all know that. So there's 3 ways of expressing this remainder, but I think in your math classes when you were in elementary school, you probably just said remainder 1 and then went from there. But it really means 1, one part of the divisor, or the divisor 2. So how many people got all of those correct? Raise your hand. Okay, very, very good.